Hi, welcome to the first day of notes. So I thought because we're just starting in our notebook, maybe on the very first page, we should, sorry, I'm just adjusting this a little bit. We should maybe start with a table of contents. So at the beginning of each chapter, you know what we're doing. Sometimes we adjust these days. For right now, we know that there's about 10 days that we are going to do this, but I don't want to tell you everything because sometimes we adjust. So each day you should go in and type these in or write these in. So today we're doing day 1, classifying real numbers. Tomorrow we'll do order of operations. So you'll write day 2, order of operations, and then flip to that page. Okay, so go ahead and flip your page now. And you're going to start out with, let's put myself over here, the topic. So we are in Unit 1, and Unit 1 is Algebra Review. And then also over in the corner here, I have it a little bit too big right now. I have the date for 9/14. After that, you want to write either the essential question or the learning target. What is the goal of the day? So the goal of the day, day 1, so you can find it, is classifying real numbers. So we're learning about what real numbers are. On the left-hand side of the margin, this is where you want to jot down any notes or questions while you're taking notes. Because if I do something that, or Miss Vote or Miss Nelson or Miss Noss, because I think we're probably going to share our video notes, you can write it down on the side, and then when we get together, you will remember what your question was. Or you can always put it on a Post-it note too, if that works for you. And then pause the video too at any time for you to write. So you could write all these down and then hit pause again so that you can hear me talking. So real numbers are classified in the following groups. The first group is natural numbers. And so those are known as the counting numbers. So when you first learn to count, it's natural. 1, 2, 3. You count on your fingers. So that's why natural numbers are the counting numbers. Whole numbers add one number in there. And the only difference between whole and natural are 0. It is 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3. So it's counting numbers plus 0. The next group of numbers are known as integers. So integers are what you can put on your number line. And so I have a number line here for you. And notice that the number line doesn't stop at 0. It goes the other direction. So integers are numbers that can be written on the number line. And I also just thought of this. I have kids, these are really positive or negative whole numbers, or I should say natural numbers. So the number 1 is also natural, it's whole, and it's an integer. And then the next group is called rational numbers. So you'll see that I put this in blue here. And so rational is really what is a ratio. And so rational numbers are any numbers that can be written as a ratio. Now these numbers can be written not just as a ratio. A ratio, is like 1/9. But 1/9, you also know it as a fraction. So if you can write it as a fraction, that is a ratio. And now if you plug that fraction into your calculator, it can come out as a repeating decimal, or it can even be a terminating. Like think of 1/4. 1/4 is a fraction, and 1/4 is also like 0.25. So that would work too. So both of those are rational. Oops, 0.25. That's why I have it typed out ahead of time. If you punch in 1/9 in your calculator, it comes out as 0.1 repeating. Repeating is rational. Now you also have numbers that are irrational numbers. So irrational numbers are not ratios. So it's things that cannot look like the numbers up above. So those are going to be, if you entered an irrational number in your calculator, you would get a decimal that continues indefinitely and it does not repeat. So there's no repeating decimals. So how I also wrote this is a number that cannot be written as a fraction or a ratio. Oops, I'm going to try to move that out here. So some of them could be like pi. You know that pi, it goes into your calculator, you get a bunch of 3.14159, and it goes on, but they don't repeat. This one you'll see is a pattern, 0.353553555. You see a pattern that's repeating, but it's not the same repeating. There's an extra 5 in there. Another one that you can type into your calculator that won't repeat is the square root of a number. So if you take the square root of, let's say 7, I picked 7 because it's prime, but you could also pick like 14 too, the square root of 14. Those are going to have decimals that repeat, or that don't repeat and go on forever. So that will be irrational. All of these are considered real numbers, and that's what we are technically studying right now. However, there is such a thing as non-real numbers. I'm just going to touch on it a bit because we talk about the second semester. So non-real numbers are when you have two numbers, when they multiply together, you get a negative. And so non-real, you know that the square root of negative 36 will give you an error message on your calculator. And the square root of negative 36 really is plus or minus 6i. And that I stands for imaginary, which means it's imaginary. It doesn't exist. So that's why it's a non-real number. 5 over 0, or 5/0, is considered undefined. You will have that ratio come up when we go to do slope, and that has an undefined slope. I don't know if that's really necessarily a non-real number, but it's something that it doesn't work. This has to be interpreted as undefined. So what I want you to do as for an activity for the next part is I want you to write this into your notebook. And so when we have, oh, I forgot to delete this. When we have our numbers, any natural number is also a whole number, is also an integer, is also a rational. So you can work yourself all the way out to here where it's all wrapped in, all of these are rational numbers. But you can't go this way. So what I mean by that is 0, you could write it again here because 0 is an integer and 0 is rational. We're only going to write down the numbers once. I'm going to give you a list of numbers that I want you to put in there. And then at the bottom of this, I want you to also write where irrational and non-real numbers. So once you get that, and you can pause it if you're not done yet, here are the numbers that I want you to write into your chart that we just wrote into your notebook. So I want you to pause. I'm going to make myself smaller. I'd like you to pause it right now, and then write these into that chart. Okay, once you've written it into your chart, where did I have it now? Here it is. Once you've written it into your chart, this is hopefully what your chart looks like. So I've got everything here, and you can check. It doesn't matter about order, but any fraction is going to be in the rational because it's a ratio. A repeating decimal is a ratio. This again is a fraction. It's a ratio. All of these, and even the negative decimal, you can think of this as a negative 1/4. That's a ratio, repeating decimal. Integers would be -3 and -9. Those are the only negatives. We do have some positive integers. We just don't have to write them again. 0 is going to be all by itself, but remember 0 is also an integer, is also rational. And then we're going to come down to the natural numbers. These are all of our whole numbers. Now, if you wrote them all in here, that's fine, because like 16 would be here. 16 is also whole. 16 is also an integer. 16 is also rational. And then you can simplify all of your radicals too. Down at the bottom here are your irrationals. Here's a repeating decimal, and any square root that's not a perfect square would go here. The example pi, this is a pattern decimal, and nothing is repeating. The square root of a negative number is always non-real, or if you're dividing by a number, that's something that's undefined. Again, we aren't going into this for right now. So what you guys can do is go ahead and draw a line for your homework, and you can start your homework assignment.